Hi everybody, I am here this morning to do a reading progress update and give some ratings for books that I have recently read. So we are starting off strong with A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. This is an LGBTQ romance that is set during the war. I don't know which war. I think it's the Civil War, maybe. This is by the same author of Boyfriend Material, which I have not read yet. It was recommended to me by Carrie Can Read in her January wrap-up video. I will be linking all of the videos that these books were recommended to me in the description box below. So that way you can see what the original reviewer said. So this is an LGBTQ romance, and what happens is the main character, her name is Viola, she realizes she is transgender, so she fakes her own death so that way she doesn't have to tell her family that she's transgender. And so this makes me think of the Mulan fan theory that Li Shang is bisexual, Mulan's love interest, and if that movie had been updated for previous times similar to this book, it would have been perfectly wonderful to see, because the reason why there's a fan theory that Li Shang is bi is because he falls in love when Mulan is dressed up as a man, and he's upset when he finds out that he's a woman. I really loved this book. I loved the wartime setting and how the romance builds up. And for the discussion questions, there's even question 5. What is historical fiction even for? Part 2. There's often resistance among fans of historical fiction, including historical romance, and in some cases even including fantasy, to writing stories about LGBTQ plus people that don't just consist of wall-to-wall bigotry and misery on the basis that it's historically inaccurate. So 2 questions here, really. Firstly, is it in fact historically inaccurate? Secondly, does it matter if the purpose of historical fiction only ever to imagine historical societies as they were, or as we were in the habit of imagining that they were? So I feel like this book reimagines what it would have been like for characters to be LGBTQ plus in the time period this book was set in, because obviously it was not well known back in those times. And even when the episode of Friends aired in 1996 where Carol and Susan got married, that was iconic for its time too. And as I have said in past videos where I have talked about my favorite Friends episodes, I just love Carol and Susan's representation and how they their love is shown. And I really also love the relationship development between Viola when she realizes that she's transgender and her love interest, whose name is Justin. And I really loved their relationship. I thought it was sweet. The next book that I wanted to talk about was recommended to me by Jessica over at These Lyrics and Lines. It is called Very Sincerely Yours by a new author to me, Carrie Winfrey. And this book is about a 30-year-old girl named Theodora who owns a toy store, and she's going through sort of, I don't know if you would call it a midlife crisis, because this girl is in her 30s, but no matter how you view it, she's having a tough time in her life. So she gains solace in watching a TV show that's very similar to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood called Everett's Place, where kids can write in like kids wrote into Mr. Rogers asking for advice or talking about issues that bother them. So this book turns into a romance similar to the 1997 romance movie You've Got Mail with Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks, where Teddy and Everett form a friendship that progresses into a romance through the letters that they write each other, kind of like in Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, although there is no war element in this book. The discussion question that I wanted to answer is, Teddy finds comfort in watching Everett's Place, even though it isn't the target audience. Do you have a show, film, or book that is a metaphorical security blanket? Would you ever want to meet the creator? So, a show that I grew up watching besides Friends that I consider a comfort show is probably the series from Nickelodeon called Rugrats, because I grew up watching that cartoon and I love it, and I feel the same way about SpongeBob SquarePants as well. But live action shows that I feel are comfort shows to me besides Friends are Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, Boy Meets World, basically whatever shows were on TGIF that I would watch every Friday night from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And also shows that were on the block that Friends was in. So Friends, Mad About You, and Frasier. I think that was what was in that must-see TV block, but I don't remember if that's correct. So both of these books were 5-star reads. Thank you to Carrie and Jess for their recommendations. The next book I wanted to talk about today is the Ex-Vows. This is by the same author who wrote You with a View. You with a View was recommended to me by Destiny Sidwell, and so was this book. I also think that Rachel Catherine read it. This is a romantic comedy about two people who meet at their friend's wedding, and they were in a relationship when they were younger, and they broke up, and they're like reconnecting for a second chance romance. I don't know. I'm not sure I liked the couple in this book as much as I did in You with a View. I liked the writing in this book for sure. Jessica Joyce is a good writer, and I love the wedding setting. It adds to the romance and the thrill of it all. I gave this book 3 stars, and I gave You with a View 5 stars. The next book is a book that was a book I picked up on my own whimsy and not by any recommendation of a friend or a YouTuber or a family member. This is called Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson, and it was on the shelf of books by Irish authors that was at the library. This is a romantic comedy, historical. This is a romance that is set in 2001 it's the evening of 16-year-old Melody's coming-of-age ceremony in her grandparents' Brooklyn brownstone. Watched lovingly by her relatives and friends making her entrance to the soundtrack of Prince, she wears a special custom-made dress, but the event is not without poignancy. 16 years earlier, that very dress was measured and sewn for a very different wearer, Melody's mother, for her own ceremony, a celebration that ultimately never took place. Unfurling the history of Melody's parents and grandparents to show how they all arrived at this moment, Woodson considers not just the ambitions of success, but also the costs, the tolls they paid for striving to overcome expectations and escape the pull of history, as it explores sexual desire and identity, ambition, gentrification, education, class, and status, and the life-altering facts of parenthood. Red at the Bone most strikingly looks at ways in which young people must so often make lifelong decisions about their lives even before they have begun to figure out who they are and what they want to be. I really loved this book. It was my first book that I have ever read by this author, and I really love her writing style and how she paints the picture of this family. I gave this book 4.5 stars. The next book is a book that I heard about from a couple of different booktubers, actually. With Cindy reviewed it last year, I think maybe in May or June, and then 2 Used Stories, her name is Jenny. She mentioned this book I think she mentioned this book in her video about or maybe I saw it on Instagram about books that inspired Japanese anime movies. So this book touches on mental illness and bullying because it talks about a 16-year-old girl who gets bullied, and she sees a lonely castle in the mirror and gets transported through her mirror into a fantasy world where she meets people who own her own age who are going through similar experiences. And I love the journey this book took me on. I could relate to the character because when I was younger, I was bullied, and I just loved the imaginative writing of this author. I am on a kick now of reading Japanese books that inspire animated movies. So I'm excited to get started on this journey with that book, and also Howl's Moving Castle. I gave Howl's Moving Castle 5 stars, and this book 4.5 stars. The next book I wanted to discuss is called Someone Who Will Love You in All Your Damaged Glory. Again, this book was reviewed by a few different booktubers. Jack Edwards talked about it, and I believe also maybe Jessica and Emmeline might have, and also Carrie might have too. So this book is by the guy who wrote the animated cartoon series BoJack Horseman. So if you are a fan of BoJack Horseman, you will be familiar with Raphael Bob Waxberg's writing style. Personally, I have not seen it, but I have seen clips from BoJack Horseman and YouTube videos by Miss Mojo and other bookstagrammers other YouTubers who review cartoons like Mysterious Mr. Enter and Phantom Strider. So this book is a collection of short stories that relate to certain issues like dealing with being dumped and stuff like that. My favorite short stories are These Are Facts, Lunch with the Person Who Dumped You, You Want to Know What Plays Are Like, and The Average of All Possible Things. I gave this book 4.5 stars. The next book that I wanted to talk about is The Co-op by Tara DeWitt. This is by the same author of Savor It. I will read you what it is about. Lorraine Levine and Deacon Leaves had a one-shot and contentious summer fling when they were teens, certainly nothing to build a foundation on, but a decade later when their grandmothers have left them with shared ownership of their dilapidated Santa Cruz building, they're thrust back together and have to figure out how to brace up the pieces. Lorraine has the money, but in order to access her trust, she has to be married. Deacon has a construction experience but lacks the funds. A deal is struck. Marry for however long it takes to fix up the property, collect a profit, and cut ties. In a home without walls, the pair will have to break down emotional ones, deal with the exposure of living with the opposite sex and none of the perks, much to their growing frustration, and learn what it means to truly cooperate as a team. Filled with cracking tension, the co-op is a steamy second-chance romance about the never-ending construction project of marriage and uncovering all the things that build character within ourselves. So this is my first book by Tara DeWitt, and Savor It is next up on my TBR by this author. I really like her writing style and the development of the relationship between Loren and Deacon. This book was recommended to me by Gabby Reeds in her recent Reading Romance for a Week video, and I gave this book 4 stars. The next book is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This trilogy of murder mystery books is hyped up a lot on YouTube, and this definitely lives up to the hype. I really enjoyed it. I was on the edge of the seat my whole time, and I can't wait to read the rest of the series to see how the mystery progresses. 5 stars. The next book is The Best Hex Ever by Nadia Alfasi. This was in Carrie Can Read's Halloween rom-com video that came out in October, and I don't remember what she gave it for a rating. I think it was maybe 3 stars, and I sort of agree with her. In my opinion, this romance is pretty mediocre. It's not my favorite romantic comedy book that I've read. It seemed predictable in a lot of places. So yeah, 3 stars for this one. I agree with Carrie's point of view. The next book I wanted to talk about is All In, which was recommended to me in the pairing movies and books video that Olive at A Book Olive put out last year. She paired this book up with Battle of the Sexes, which stars Emma Watson and Steve Carell, which Matt and I are going to watch next month. And as I was talking about in the video Matt and I made last week, when I was talking about Althea, I'm not really big into tennis, so it was really interesting to know what goes on behind the scenes of playing the game. And I also loved learning about Billie Jean King's life. Star rating for memoirs can be pretty subjective for all people across booktube, including myself, but if I could give this book a rating, it would be 5 stars because I really enjoyed learning about Billie Jean King. Now into reading progress. The first book that I'm reading right now is Forging Silver into Stars. This book is a sequel to A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which is a modern retelling of Beauty and the Beast that was published in 2019 by Bridget Kammerer. I read A Curse So Dark and Lonely last year as part of my TBR for fairy tale retellings, and I gave it 5 stars. Carrie Can Read recommended this book to me in her February wrap-up, and so far I am on chapter 12, page 118. The next book that I'm reading right now is called Hang the Moon. This is a reread. I first read this in November or October after hearing about it from A Book Olive. And I really love Jeanette Walls' writing in this book and her book, The Silver Star. Both of those books got 4.5 stars. Her memoir, The Glass Castle, which I read in January, got 2.75 stars because the writing just felt scattered and all over the place and confusing. And I just felt really bad for her for how she was abused and how her siblings were abused, and it made me think of like Casey Anthony and how abusive she was to her daughter. And apparently now she's an advocate for children, which I don't think is a good thing at all because she was so abusive. The next book is a book that I am reading for a book club at Print Bookstore with Rachel Conrad for Books and Brews. This is a fiction book that is set on a pirate ship, and I'm really enjoying this book for how for the adventure it's taking me on, and I am currently on page 127. The next book is called Sourdough by Robin Sloan. This book is about a software. This is set in San Francisco, and it's about a software programmer at General Dexterity. Her name is Lois Clay. She codes all day long and collapses at night. Her human contact limited to the two brothers who run a neighborhood hole-in-the-wall from which she orders and savors dinner every evening. Then disaster. Visa issues. The brothers close up shop and fast. But they have one last delivery for Lois. Their culture, the sourdough starter brought from afar that used to bake their bread. She must keep it alive. They tell her, feed it daily, play it music, and please, please learn to bake with it. Lois is no baker, but she could use a roommate, even if the needy colony of microorganisms. Soon, not only is she eating her own homemade bread, she's providing loaves daily to the General Dexterity cafeteria. The company's chef urges her to take her project to the farmer's market. A whole new world opens up. When Lois comes before the jury that decides who sells what at Bay Area markets, she encounters a close-knit club with little appetite for new members. That's an alternative that emerges a secret market, literally underground, that aims to fuse food and technology. It might be perfect for the programmer turned baker, but who are these people exactly? And who's the mysterious Mr. Marrow presiding over it all? Leavened by the same infectious intelligence that makes Mr. Penundrum's 24-hour bookstore such a sensation, but taking on even more substantial challenges. Sourdough marks the triumphant return of a unique and beloved young writer. So I have heard really good things about Mr. Penundrum's 24-hour bookshop from other booktubers. I don't know where we got this book from, actually. Maybe we got it for Christmas a couple of years ago from Sally and Paul. But I found a listing on Instagram about books that make you think of your comfort TV show, and this book was matched up with Bob's Burgers. So this is the starting of one of my many thematic TBRs for the spring. And obviously this is for TV show books. So that TBR will be starting in May. The next book that I am reading is the newest release from Amal Al-Motar, who is one of the authors of This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is called The River Has Roots, and it's a sapphic novella that's a romance. I will read you the description. In the small town of Thistleford on the edge of Ferry, the mysterious Hawthorne family tends the willow trees there. For as long as anybody can remember, the Hawthorns have paid tribute to the willow trees, honoring an ancient compact to sing to them and honoring their ancient compact to sing to them in thanks for their magic. None, though, have taken up this calling more devoutly than the family's latest daughters, Esther and Isabel, who cherish each other as much as they cherish the trees. But when Esther rejects a forceful suitor in favor of a lover from the land of Fairy, not only the sisters bond, but also their lives will be at risk. I am currently on page 83. The next book is a reread from my Black History Month last year. My Black History Month TBR last year that reappears on my TBR called Let's Go to the Movies, which is books that are either books about or have similar themes to the Oscar-nominated movies. This TBR was formulated because I found a post on Instagram about books that are have similar themes to movies that were nominated for Oscars, and this book was paired up with the Nickel Boys. And I will be rereading the Nickel Boys eventually also. I am currently on page 206. The next book that I am reading is We Could Be Rats. This is Emily Austin's latest book. She also wrote Interesting Facts About Space and Everyone in This Room Could Someday Be Dead, which I gave both 4.5 stars to. Now with this book, I just started it today. I am on page 48. This book is kind of depressing. I don't know what I was expecting to get out of it. I thought it was talked about as a book about sister relationships, but mostly it's about a girl who is attempting to write suicide notes to her family, but she can't seem to get the words out. Each chapter is basically a new attempt at a letter. Gabby Reeds just reviewed this book in her video that she posted about reading anticipated releases, and I don't know if I share her opinion or not, and I'm not sure how far I'm going to get in this book before I DNF it. We will see. The next book that I'm reading is called We Will Be Jaguars by Nimonte Ninquimo. This was Reese's book club pick for last November, and I am doing a tandem read with the audiobook, currently on chapter 16, and I have 10 chapters left, so I'm hoping to finish this in the next couple of days. Now, a couple of channel announcements. I have a new video coming out on, first of all, the first episode of the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR podcast that I do with Kathleen will be out tomorrow. I don't know the time yet since it's going to be on her YouTube channel, and she is going to be emailing me the link whenever she posts it. I will be posting a video on Saturday when I get home from the library with another haul, because I will be hauling new books, and then I will be talking about my reading plans for the spring and the various thematic TBRs, two which I have already mentioned, which is Let's Go to the Movies, and of course From Manhattan to Stars Hollow. I will actually update you guys on progress for that TBR. Hang on a minute. So, updates for the Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR, including books that I am listening to on audiobook or reading on ebook. The first book I wanted to talk about is Brooke Shields Is Not Afraid to Get Old by Brooke Shields. It's her memoir. I listened to it in audiobook. She narrates the audiobook, and she gives a lot of good advice about aging. And the chapter that stood out to me the most was the chapter about confidence, because in the past I have had trouble with my confidence, not so much anymore, but some of the stuff she said was really inspirational, and I really appreciate her for it. So I gave Brooke Shields Is Not Afraid to Get Old 4.5 stars. The next book that I listened to last month on audiobook for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This book was recommended to me by Books and Lala. She read it as part of her Finding a 5-Star Read for Every Year That She Was Alive project. and this book was featured in her video for 1994. I read several books. I'm reading several books throughout the year from her videos in this series for this TBR, and the link to her playlist will be in the description box below. The next book on this TBR that I wanted to talk about is Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson. Another book that was recommended to me by Books and Lala. This is a novel in prose that is focused on Greek mythology, and much like the book that I read for book club with Rachel Conrad in February called Helen of Troy 1993, I really loved how this tells a tale of Greek myth that we are not familiar with, and how it builds up the romance between Garion and his lover, who I can't remember the name of. The next book that I'm reading for this TBR is Beartown by Friedrich Bachmann, which I have over there in the coffee table drawer. I forgot to take it out. I am on chapter 30 in Beartown right now. This is my reread of it. I read it last year for the first time, and I gave it 4 stars. Also for this TBR, I reread Anxious People. Last year, when I read Anxious People, I had to DNF it because I thought the pacing was too slow. But then, upon my reread and finishing it, I was able to up my rating from 2.75 stars to 3 stars just because his writing is so engaging, and I loved how each character who is dealing with this bank heist discusses their anxiety and how they're feeling. I think it really gives great insights into anxiety. The next book that I'm talking about on this TBR that's a reread that I'm going to be rereading in July is Beach Read by Emily Henry. Basically, I'm rereading all of Emily Henry's books for this TBR. Last month I reread Happy Place and Book Lovers. In July I'm rereading Beach Read. And People We Meet on Vacation, and watching the new movie that's going to be on Netflix. And then I'm also reading her new release when it comes out next month, Great Beautiful Life. And then once me and Kathleen finish reading all of Emily Henry's books, we're going to tier rank them when we do our summer wrap-up at the end of September. I don't think my opinions are going to change very much, and I can't anticipate what I'm going to give Great Big Beautiful Life yet, but the rest of Emily Henry's books have been between 4 and 5 star reads. The next book that I am waiting to get at the library still is Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. Gabby Reeds read this in a video last year. I don't remember what the theme of the video was, but the reason why I chose to read this book for this TBR is because Brad Pitt is in the movie, and he was on the episode of Friends where Monica and Rachel's high school friend Will comes to Thanksgiving dinner, and Ross and Will tell Rachel that in high school they started an I Hate Rachel Green club. They masked it as a way to make fun of Rachel, but we all know that Ross was in love with Rachel all throughout high school, and he reignites his crush during Friends. The next reread is Funny Story by Emily Henry. This was Emily Henry's release from last spring, and I loved it. I think Miles and Daphne are probably my second favorite couple besides Gus and January in Beach Read. And Miles in Funny Story is so Nick Miller coded. Nick Miller, the character from New Girl, who's played by Max Greenfield, that it's not even funny. So if you are a fan of New Girl and Nick is your favorite character, you should read Funny Story. The next book that I read, that I reread for this TBR, was Malibu Rising. Technically, this book really has nothing to do with Friends or Gilmore Girls, but one of the movies that we're watching is Bridget Jones's Diary, which is a 1990s rom-com starring Renee Zellweger and Hugh Grant from Notting Hill. And it's a modern retelling of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, which we are also reading and doing a book to movie comparison for. So Malibu Rising was on a list I found on Instagram about books that describe characters from Bridget Jones's Diary, and this book was paired up with Bridget, but I can't understand why. Maybe it's because Bridget and Nina are similar characters, but I don't really know. The next reread on this TBR is One Italian Summer by Lauren Serrell. I read this book last July, and I loved the setting of it because it's about it's about a girl who goes on vacation to Italy to honor her mother who passed away, kind of similar to Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Walsh. And I love this book for the setting, and how the main character uses her trip to Italy to deal with her grief. And I'm going to be listening to the audiobook of this, and I can't wait to listen to it because Lauren Graham narrates it. That's why it's on the Gilmore Girls TBR. The next book, One Italian Summer got 4 stars. Malibu Rising got 4 stars. Funny Story got 4.5 stars. The next reread on this TBR is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, which was a 5-star read for me, and I can't wait to start my reread. The last 2 books on this TBR are I have an updated list for this TBR. I'm sorry. The next 2 books that I wanted to mention are The Strawberry Patch Pancake House and The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. These books are in the same series as The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. The Pumpkin Spice Cafe got 4.5 stars. The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore got 4 stars. The Christmas Tree Farm got 3 stars. So I'm interested to see where on the rating list this book will fall. To me, this series is the Canadian version of Love Life Farms, because instead of being set in Minnesota or Michigan or wherever B.K. Borson sets the Love Life Farm series, this book series is set in Ontario, Canada. And this town is obviously very similar to Stars Hollow, where Pumpkin Spice Cafe and also where the Love Life Farm books are set. A couple of other books I have recently added to the Friends and Gilmore Girls TBR for the next couple of months are Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. So this book was recommended to me by Sarah Caroli last year, and I am just getting around to reading it now. It is a romance that is set in New York City. This is a dual POV. the past POV is set when the two main characters are in college, and then the present day is set 10 years later when the characters reconnect. This was on a post. This book was recommended to me by Sarah Caroli, and I also saw it on a post I saw on Instagram recently about books that describe your comfort shows. And this book is called Before We Were Strangers, and it's about how people meet at an earlier time in their lives and then reconnect. So I think the connection this book has to Friends is that in the episode in season 3 where Janice asks Janice, who was dating Chandler at the time, asks Chandler and all the others how they met each other, it goes into a flashback where Central Perk was a bar instead of a coffee shop. This was when Monica was fat and Rachel didn't get her nose job yet. And when Ross had his afro, actually, no, that was the Thanksgiving episode, and Ross had his afro. But this basically sets up, like, the flashback in this episode sets up the pilot, because it's when Ross first finds out that he got cheated on by Carol. So I think that's the connection that this book, Before We Were Strangers, has to Friends. The next 2 books I'm rereading are Business Casual and In the Weeds, which are books 2 and 4 from the Love Life Farm series by B.K. Borison. These will be rereads. And then the next book that I will be reading is One Day by David Nichols. This was either recommended to me by Haley Pham or Sarah Caroli. I can't remember who. Maybe both of them reviewed it at one point. And I'm not really sure how it connects to Friends either. I guess I have to read the book and determine it. The next book I'm going to be rereading for the From Manhattan to Stars Hollow TBR is The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. I read this book for the first time last summer. And I think how it connects to Friends is because it's about 2 roommates who share an apartment together in London who have separate schedules and fall in love with each other through writing each other letters. And I think how this could connect to Friends is maybe it is related to like Monica and Chandler and how their romance breaks up or builds up throughout the series, or Rachel and Ross. I don't exactly know how this book connects to Friends. The next book that's on this TBR is These Vicious Games. I don't remember the author of this book, so I found this book on a list of books that describe Gilmore Girl characters, and it was paired up with Paris, so I'm interested to see how this book connects to Paris's character. I also wanted to talk about some other books that I already returned to the library that I read in the past couple of weeks that I wanted to talk about. The first book that I wanted to talk about is Sky Full of Elephants. This is I think I have mentioned this book in other videos, but I finished it on February 21st, and I really enjoyed this dystopian book and how it reimagines how things would be different for people of different races. And I gave it 4.5 stars. This book was recommended to me by Gabby Reeds. The next book that I wanted to talk about is 10 minutes and 38 seconds in This Strange World. This book was a little bit weird, and I'm not sure I liked it. It was recommended to me by Carrie Can Read, and it was in her January wrap-up video. This is a book about a girl who works in a bar who gets assaulted and left to die in a dumpster. The beginning of the book is basically how she's reflecting on her life in the 10 minutes and 30 seconds before she dies. And then in the second half of the book, her friends find her and give her a proper funeral. It was sad, it was depressing, but the writing was good, and that's what saved it for me from being totally a 2-star rating. I gave it 3 stars. The next book that I wanted to talk about was Just Kids by Patti Smith. This was a memoir of a singer from the 1970s. Her name is Patti Smith, and she talks about her life as an adult and what led her, her life growing up and what led her to become a musician that was pretty highly known in the 1970s, and her relationship with her husband. I really enjoyed it. This book was on one of the Gilmore Girls TBR lists I found on Instagram, and it is matched up with Lane's character, and I think it would be a good book to pair up with Lane because it's about a musician. Is that all? I felt like there was something else. The other book I wanted to talk about is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think I might have reviewed this in my last video, but in case I didn't, it's probably my least favorite book by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Again, it's about tennis, and tennis is not my favorite sport. I read this last year, I DNF'd it, and I had the same type of reaction to it this time. The rating of 2.75 stars does not change. And I believe we are all set. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I will be back on Saturday with my spring reading plans. Have a good day.